Following that breaking news we've been telling you about all morning, former Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Colin Powell, has died. Secretary Powell served the country over the course of 4 decades, breaking barriers at every turn. Powell's family announced his passing on Facebook, saying that he passed away this morning because of complications from COVID-19. They say he was fully vaccinated. The family thanked the staff at Walter Reed Hospital for caring for him, going on to say, quote, "We have lost a remarkable and loving husband, father, grandfather, and a great American." From Powell's career as a distinguished soldier to his time in the White House, BNC's Del Walters has a look back at his legacy.
I will never not be a soldier.
Colin Powell, a soldier turned statesman, making history on many fronts. The first African American and youngest chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and later the first African American Secretary of State.
So I've always felt strongly that you should try to solve conflicts in this world through negotiations, through diplomacy. Anytime we can solve a problem that way and not use force and satisfy our objectives, let's push for that.
Powell grew up in the Bronx in New York, his parents immigrating from Jamaica. By his own admission, he was not an outstanding student.
It's been amusing over the years to have people come up to me and say, "Well, General Powell, you're chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When did you graduate from West Point?" Couldn't have gotten in.
He enrolled in City College of New York. Geology was his major, but ROTC became his passion. Powell flourished as a cadet after graduating and excelled as a soldier. He served 2 tours in Vietnam before earning a prestigious fellowship working for the Office of Management and Budget during the Nixon years in 1972. Afterwards, Powell returned to his troops, eventually becoming a general, and went back to the White House in 1987 as President Reagan's national security advisor. Then in 1989, the general became the highest-ranking officer in the U.S. military when President George H.W. Bush named him chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Our strategy to go after this army is very, very simple. First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it. How long have you been there? You've been there the whole time?
Powell became a household name during the first Gulf War. His policy of overwhelming force against Iraq became known as the Powell Doctrine.
I express my sincere thanks to each and every one of you for being here to share my final day in uniform.
After a distinguished 35-year career, Powell retired from the Army in 1993. 10 years later, the United States would become involved in another Gulf War, and Powell again played a key role.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
Then, Secretary of State Powell made a case in front of the UN Security Council, arguing that Iraq posed a grave threat to the world because, he said, they had weapons of mass destruction. The following month, the U.S. invasion began. The war lasted more than 8 years. No weapons of mass destruction ever turned up.
I regret it now because the information was wrong.
After 4 years as President George W. Bush's Secretary of State, Powell returned to private life. He spent his civilian years empowering youth through his projects, America's Promise Alliance, and the Colin Powell School for Civic and Global Leadership.
We're going to go and educate the kids who are most in need. And when I heard their stories, I said, this is where I belong. I'm home again.
General Colin Powell, a leader and a patriot who devoted a lifetime to service.
That was BNC Washington Bureau Chief Del Walters, who joins me now, along with retired Oklahoma Congressman J.C. Watts, to talk about the life and many, many accomplishments of General Colin Powell. Gentlemen, welcome to BNC Live. It's always a pleasure to have you both. Congressman Watts, we'll start with you. Talk about your interactions that you had with the Secretary over the years when you were active in Congress and afterward, and also his importance as a role model for communities of color.
Well, I served with or overlapped with General Powell when I was on the front lines of public service. And I think one of the really tremendous things that stands out about him is that he was well respected by Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives. He had an integrity that was impeccable. And I think he understood the importance of serving our country or protecting our country, not protecting a president. And I think that was consistent throughout his term as leader, as a national security advisor, Secretary of State, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Very well respected, and his word, his integrity carried a lot of weight.
Yes, absolutely. And during the Bush era, the second Bush, 43rd president, Del, this question's for you actually. Powell seemed to be the voice of reason with what a lot of media called his cautionary Pottery Barn conversation to the president, saying, if you break Iraq, you own it. Did he always appear to think things through to such an extent? And what does that say about the way his mind worked?
You know, it was fascinating the way his mind worked. It's interesting you bring that up. That was actually the title of my book, The Pottery Barn Rules, because of what he said. He says, if we invade Iraq, we will own the fates and fortunes of 25 million people there. So if we go into Iraq, think of it as the Pottery Barn. You break it, you own it. But what is fascinating is, and I don't know if the congressman remembers this, but Colin Powell is the reason that I know J.C. Watts. Colin Powell, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said that he wanted all of the documents concerning atrocities with black soldiers to be declassified at the National Archives. As an investigative reporter, we investigated the massacre of 11 soldiers, black soldiers in Wereth, Belgium, who were massacred at the hands of the Nazis. And then with J.C. Watts and Ron Dellums, both members of Congress, on the Armed Services Committee, we got them their posthumous medal. So it is because of Colin Powell that I actually know J.C. Watson, as they say, so here we are.
Congressman, did you want to respond to that?
Well, and I think because of Dell's investigative reporting, and I think General Powell been in the position that he was in, that's probably why that happened. Ron and I, being on Armed Services, had a chance to nudge it along and to navigate it. But had General Powell not been in place, the speed of the pack was actually determined by the leader, and General Powell was the leader, and you know, we saw that come to pass. And I think that's just one little snippet of his leadership. I think, you know, he was never a group thinker. You know, he didn't think that he had to think a certain way because he was Republican or because he served Republican presidents. I think he felt like, again, my service is to my country, and I'm supposed to give the president the best advice available to me, and I'm supposed to tell him what he needs to hear and not what he wants to hear. And we've seen kind of a shift in that ideology over the last 4 or 5 years.
Congressman, let's continue that conversation, because that's actually an interesting take. I mean, he was a man that stood on his own 2 feet, serving under both Republican and Democratic presidents, also changing his political affiliation multiple times. Was that just who he was, or was that also part of his upbringing as well, and what made him such a respected figure in Washington?
Well, I think, and again, I've alluded to the fact that he wanted the truth. You know, the issue that Dale uncovered in an investigative reporting, General Powell was led by the truth. He said, I'll follow the facts. I think in Iraq, you know, he even had the character and the integrity to come out and say, hey, I made a mistake. I mean, how many times do you see people in the political arena say, hey, I made a mistake? You know, again, I just think the way he led, and I think he was transparent. What you saw is what you got. And I think there was an appreciation for that in spite of the fact that, you know, he might have been one party or the other. I think his integrity led him, not his party affiliation.
Del, at a time the country is so divided, and so many folks are believing the big lie and perpetuating that. Just to piggyback off of what Congressman Watts just said, that he stood on integrity and truth, talk about how he'll be missed.
I think he will be missed for the fact that he did admit a mistake. And it is strange in a town where nobody even wants to admit that they said something or they misspoke or they used the wrong word. Colin Powell came out with perhaps the biggest mistake on the world stage. He said that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There weren't. but he had the boldness to come out and say that he was wrong. And then he retired into private life, and he devoted the rest of his life trying to rid the world of nukes. But he will be remembered for something that so many in this town would do well to follow, which is to say, I got it wrong. No one expects politicians in Washington to walk on water. I think the congressman and I would agree on that. What made Colin Powell such a big man was the fact that he wasn't so big to admit that maybe once in his life he got it wrong. And yes, it was a bad mistake, but the fact that he admitted it was the thing that made him so different in Washington. And how odd was it? How many other politicians have you ever seen follow that model?
Yeah, to our audience members, Dell is talking about that speech that he gave to the UN. Congressman, did he ever talk to you about regretting that speech? And if so, what did he say to you?
He never talked to me personally about that, but he went on national TV and on another network, and I saw him on that network saying that, hey, I made a mistake. And I think it takes, especially in politics, it takes an awfully big person to say, hey, I blew it. If I had it over again, I would do it differently. But I think General Powell, I didn't talk to him about that, but when he was at the State Department, he had asked me to go over to Vienna, lead a delegation over there on discussing xenophobia with the world, and went over there and represented the United States. I was asked to come to one of his birthday celebrations and give a tribute to him. So we got to know each other pretty well, and not many places did you go back in those days in the higher echelons of government that you see somebody that looked like us. And not only did you see someone that looked like us in General Powell, he gave all of us, regardless of our skin color, regardless of our party affiliation, he gave us that picture on the box that showed us what it was supposed to look like. And that will be a lasting legacy, and he will be tremendously missed because of, again, the integrity. And I mentioned integrity, I've mentioned that 3 or 4 times, simply because we've seen a lack of it over the last 4 or 5 years. And he just demonstrated what a soldier and what a patriot was supposed to look like.
Yeah. Thank you, Congressman Dell. Final thought for you, or perhaps a fond memory, as Congressman Watts just shared?
I think Sharon Pratt, the former mayor, said it best when she said that Colin Powell filled the room. And that's hard to do in Washington. Imagine a ballroom filled with the largest egos in the world. And yet when Colin Powell, I can only remember that on 3 occasions, maybe 4, due to the former congressman there. But when Colin Powell walked in the room, when J.C. Watts walked in the room, I remember when we were in New York on Wall Street, everybody gathered around J.C. saying, hey, ain't you the dude that won the Heisman Trophy? Aren't you that congressman? Colin Powell had that presence. Barack Obama had that presence. Nelson Mandela had that presence. Sharon Pratt said he filled the room, and he did just that.
Gentlemen, such an honor
Shawnee Dale's put me in pretty tall cotton there.
Well, they said that's tall cotton.
He knows where his bread is buttered.
But no, I just thank you for letting me come on and celebrating a wonderful man and a wonderful life. And again, someone that gave us all, in spite of party affiliations, skin color, what part of town we might have grown up in, you could look to him with great pride as a man of integrity and someone that you wouldn't mind following.
Absolutely. Congressman Dell, such an honor. Thank you both for sharing fond memories of General Colin Powell. He will be remembered and loved.